A hard-right Supreme Court nominee, if she makes it onto the bench, could radically destroy American life as we know it. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Well, Ruth Bader Ginsberg has passed away. She is in the light. There's a Jewish tradition that when a Jewish person dies on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, basically that means God waited for the entire year to take them back home. Therefore, they must be a tzaddik, a righteous person. I think that certainly defines Ruth Bader Ginsberg. And now we have Donald Trump figuring out how he can make political hay out of this. He says he's going to nominate a woman. Hey, that worked out well for Joe Biden with regard to a vice presidential candidate. Maybe it'll work out well for him. And he has in particular one woman who is a member of a Catholic cult that says that husbands should control their wives, and as opposed to abortion. And he's got another woman who is, fervently Catholic, but also the child of Cuban immigrants, and pretty hardcore right wing. But he gets to nominate a woman and a Hispanic to the court. And then there's a couple of other women that he says are on his list. God only knows where this is going to go. But while everybody is focusing on abortion, the Supreme Court, if you look back at the history of the Supreme Court and what the Supreme Court did the last time it was seriously hardcore conservative, which was in the years leading up to 1937. What was referred to as the Lochner Court. It started with this Lochner decision, as I recall, in 1905. And although the Lochner Court is, generally viewed as kind of more or less broadly in that time, it could do massive damage to the entire spectrum of American life. Ever since the 1930s, the Social Security Act was signed, as I recall, in 1935. Literally since that day, Republicans have been trying to destroy Social Security. Donald Trump now says if he's reelected president, that within 3 years, Social Security will be dead because he's going to cut off its funding. And that doesn't seem to be bothering Republicans. This is just kind of mind-boggling, really. But he might not even have to wait 3 years if he gets a right-wing Supreme Court justice. Because, the Supreme Court could easily say, well, there's nothing in the Constitution that mentions Social Security. Yeah, it does talk about the general welfare, but in fact, several times. But hey, we get to decide what that means. Since the 1960s, Medicare and Medicaid, these two healthcare programs, the Lyndon Johnson and the Democrats, without a single Republican vote, as I recall. I may be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure at the very least, very few Republican votes, Medicare and Medicaid were passed. And Republicans ever since then have been saying that that's socialism. And not only that, right now this administration, the Trump administration, along with 20 other Republican secretaries of state or attorney generals or governors, I believe it's AGs and governors, have a lawsuit before the Supreme Court that they were supposed to hear this spring. And as a giant wet kiss to Donald Trump, John Roberts said, we'll just postpone hearing this case until after the election. But it's basically, a case that says that Obamacare is wrong. And that one is particularly mind-boggling because if Obamacare gets blown up by this decision, and by the way, it went to the Fifth Circuit Court, that's a Texas judge, a Texas appeals court, said, yes, the entire thing is unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional to force insurance companies to pay claims for people who have pre-existing conditions. It's unconstitutional to tell insurance companies that they can't, collude with hospitals to engage in surprise billing of people. It's unconstitutional to tell insurance companies that they can't have higher prices for women than for men. It's unconstitutional to say that insurance companies have to cover kids, even non-dependent kids, until they're 27 years old. All those things, all that stuff in the Affordable Care Act, it's unconstitutional for the government to help pay part of your health expense, your health insurance costs. All of that stuff is unconstitutional. So this lower court blew up literally the entire Affordable Care Act, including the protections for people who have pre-existing conditions. And by the way, we now have several million people in America with COVID, which is now a pre-existing condition. So this decision, this case is going to be heard by the Supreme Court after the election. And right now there's 8 justices on the court. And even if Roberts joins the liberals, the 3 liberals, Breyer, Kagan, and Sotomayor, even if Roberts joins them, so it's a 4-4 decision, that means that the court basically doesn't decide, which means that lower court decision, which eliminated Obamacare altogether, including the protections for pre-existing conditions, that ruling will stand. No more Obamacare. But it goes beyond that. I mean, I think that this court could take out Medicare and Medicaid. This court, Republicans, numerous Republicans, Rand Paul's kind of at the forefront of this, but this has become Republican ideology. Of course, David Koch ran for president on this back in the 1980s. End all the minimum wage laws, end long-term unemployment insurance, end the child labor laws. The new excuse that Republicans are using is the old excuse. Well, what about kids who grow up on farms? That was the excuse that they used to say we shouldn't have child labor laws back in the 1930s when the Supreme Court struck down child labor laws. And, now they're at it again. Since the Reagan Revolution, Republicans have systematically torn apart our public schools. The state of Michigan, where Betsy DeVos is from, and where her money has huge political influence. Over half their schools have now been privatized in Michigan. With a conservative court, we could see basically the end of any sort of reasonably functioning public school system nationwide. Are you concerned about climate change? Driving massive fires, storms, hurricanes? A conservative court could rule that any law, or any policy for that matter, designed to reduce carbon emissions are an unlawful violation of refiners and drillers and frackers' constitutional right to do business. With a truly conservative court, and frankly, I think with at least several of these women that Donald Trump is considering, you could lose your right to be protected from being ripped off by a bank. That's the Consumer Protection Bureau. You could lose your right to be protected by government from your insurance company ripping you off. You could lose what few rights you have left to prevent yourself from getting ripped off by your internet service provider or even your utilities if they're for-profit corporations. They could roll back gay marriage and invalidate a whole bunch of marriages all across the United States. They could end altogether the right of labor unions even to exist, take us back to where we were before the passage of the Wagner Act in the early 1930s, the National Labor Relations Act. They could endorse privatization of the post office. I mean, literally all of these are positions that are currently held by various high-profile conservative think tanks and movement leaders, and they all reflect positions that David Koch ran for vice president on in 1980 and that are now embraced by some of these hardcore Republicans, including some currently in Congress. Conservatives don't want to just take America back to the 1950s. They want to take us back to the 1920s. And we need to be telling our Democratic representatives, and particularly in the Senate, because that's where this is all happening. And the number for the Senate is 202-225-3121. We need to tell them, no, stop these guys. Stop the Republicans. Stop them now.